Hi. Hey, Russ there. Hey, good morning. Hey, I wanted us to do a quick video here. I'm going to take this piece of plywood and break it down on top of my two sawhorses. I've got them set 4 foot apart. And what we're going to do is use my Styrofoam 2x4's to support this thing on this small footprint and be able to cut this plywood without having to help hold that extra piece by hand and make it real easy to break down this piece of plywood. Now, I set them 4 foot apart. If this thing was on the ground instead of up here, I would be able to cut it a lot easier. So what I did is I put it up here though to show you how to do it on a smaller footprint. This blue piece of tape and this one represents where my sawhorse is on this piece of plywood, how it's sitting on here. This piece of tape shows my cut line of where I want to cut this plywood. I want to cut this piece loose from the bigger part. So the first thing I'm going to do, if I had this on the ground, I would take and I would put one of these there, one of these there, and one of these back here, and that's all I would need to cut this plywood if it was on the ground. I would make my cut across here. I would get support on this piece from these two pieces. I would get support on this piece from the other half of these two and that one. So I would be able to be very stable on the ground to cut it. But quite honestly, I'm getting too old to get down on my knees and do this kind of stuff. So by doing it up here, it makes it easier for me. But I have to do this a little differently. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put one right here, put one of them right here so that it's touching underneath on top of my sawhorses. Then I'm going to take 2 of them and put them underneath like that, and the other 2 like this. And now what that configuration does for me is it gives me support of my plywood off of these 2 stands, and all 6 pieces are helping support this full piece of plywood. So when I make this cut, everything should remain stable. This piece here will stay put, so I don't have to hold it while I'm cutting it through it. And this is how it will work. So let me set this up. We're going to do this cut. And when I get done, everything should stay put for me right here. So, first thing, wood always goes down. So the first one goes right there. Like so. Take the second one. And that one goes there. Now we take these 2 and put them right here. And bring them out at an angle. You can support as far out as I can. Now, just for grins, I'm also going to put a clamp right here, but I don't think I really need it. My track goes there. And now we put these 2 here to give it added support. Now I'm ready to do my cut. I take my track saw and let's do our cut. Now then, you can see how easy it was to make that cut. on that piece of plywood. All with the 2x4's. Now, what does this tell you? I used a very small footprint for a tabletop to break down a full sheet of plywood. If you think outside the box here for a moment, you can take and instead of doing this out here, what if you did this on top of your table saw? Your table saw is probably the same footprint, pretty close to what the sawhorses is. That's 4 foot one way and 2 foot the other way. That's the base of the tabletop. If you use your tabletop of your table saw, you could do the same thing. You wouldn't have to worry about damaging your tabletop, and actually it's big enough to put up a full sheet and cut it down to a manageable size right on top of your tabletop. So this little demonstration shows you that you can cut this piece of plywood using the Styrofoam 2x4's anywhere you want, and it should hold it up without any problem, and I'm able to break it down. Now usually I only break down one sheet of plywood at a time, but if I really wanted to, you could put a lot of sheets of plywood on top and stack them up, and do one sheet at a time, working your way down through that whole stack without ever having to move the stack or damage the pieces of plywood underneath using my styrofoams. But also, if I'm doing only one, I can set up my sawhorses and I get enough support to put a full sheet of plywood up there and cut it. Just like you can on top of your table saw when you think about it. And most of us do have a table saw, but we always thought up to now that it wasn't big enough to be able to put a sheet of plywood up there and cut it. But actually, with these, you can do that even on top of your table saw. So, this is just a little helper. Hopefully you liked it. I appreciate you stopping by. If you have any comments, please leave them below. If you like this video, please say so. And subscribe if you haven't. Thanks for stopping by. And we'll talk to you soon.